welcome to the Legacy Lifestyle Podcast. So glad to have you joining us today. How you doing, Jesse?
Good.
Ready for this battle of the books?
I guess.
You guess. All right.
Hopefully I can do my part. Hopefully I can.
Well, we shall see. We'll see if this is kind of like a recurring thing. And don't let that, I know if I said battle of the books, you're like, what? Here's the deal. We're going to talk about willpower today.
Or
willpower.
Not need of it.
Or the lack thereof willpower, right? You know, willpower. I got to say it right. Willpower. Willpower. Do we have it? Does it exist? What's it like? Jesse, as I was thinking about this, as it comes to willpower, we're going to talk about, just, sources of willpower and all that kind of stuff. And I was just thinking about,
do you think you have it?
Well, here's the thing, if I find you irresistible, which I do, it probably has depleted all my willpower if I've tried to resist all day. So we'll get to that more in a second here. But willpower. Let's talk about this. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take a little bit of time. I'm going to talk about this book called Willpower by Roy F Baumeister.
Oh,
that's quite a name.
You knew how to say that.
I'm faking it.
I was wondering.
I'm faking it. If that's how you say it, Mr. Baumeister, hopefully I'm not butchering it. As one with a funky last name. He wrote a book called Willpower. And you're going to represent a book called Willpower Doesn't Work by Benjamin Hardy.
See, his name's easier to pronounce.
Absolutely. So here's what we're going to do is I'm going to go through, and so I'm going to talk about this for a second, and then Jesse's going to talk about this other book, and we're going to kind of compare and contrast. But here's the deal: if you're joining us today, as we talk about the legacy lifestyle, we're talking about things like habits and goals and dreams and all that kind of stuff, and how you go about doing these things. And so willpower, presumably plays a role in this. And so we're gonna jump in. So here's the deal: is I want to jump into Mr. Baumeister. I just like saying that, Baumeister. We're going to jump into his book here, Willpower. And here's what he says. He says, willpower is kind of this elusive thing. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't, whether it's resisting that piece of chocolate cake or whatever. And I want to talk about this in just a second, but he references David Blaine. David Blaine's the street magician, illusionist guy, but also does some incredible feats, like where he went 44 days, like standing on a tower, in the public square, I think in London or New York or one of those places. And, he just says he can exercise tremendous amounts of willpower. But what's crazy is they say when he'll get into shape for these things, he'll usually be on TV or doing his stunts or whatever, weighing in about 180 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
But then in the off season, he balloons back up to 230 pounds.
Within days, right?
Yeah. Well, within, a few weeks or whatever, like it's just like he just kind of rebounds back. And so the thought is, Roy Baumeister is kind of like tapping into how can someone exert such tremendous willpower in one arena, but then yet in his personal life, David Blaine's apartment is a mess. It's, we'll get to some of that other stuff later. But as Baumeister kind of represents this, he breaks down to willpower to kind of two essential things. He says when it comes to willpower, he says, you have a finite amount of it. And basically as you go about your day, willpower gets depleted. Okay, so if you think like willpower is like a gas tank, you got so much of it, but it depletes as the day goes by. But he does say this, he says you use the same stock of willpower for all the tasks you are doing.
Okay.
So whether you are looking at that piece of chocolate cake, or maybe someone at work is getting on your last nerve and you want to yell at them or whatever, like it's the same source of willpower.
Okay.
Is what he's claiming here. So you do have, willpower. I keep saying willpower. Willpower does get depleted, and it's the same source. But what's really interesting about what he says in his book, Willpower, is that it can be like a muscle, and you can actually strengthen it over time.
Okay.
So there are practices that we can do that we can increase these things. So he says basically there's four broad places where we use our willpower. One is control of your thoughts. Right. Okay. So maybe there's that nagging coworker, that whatever, so you're like, reject that. Well, you're exercising willpower with that. Control of your emotions, again, similar type of thing. Thoughts and emotions can be linked. Most often we'll use our power when we're trying to remain positive in negative situations.
Right.
Now that could be, again, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Trying to see the bright side of things, but you're using that source of willpower. Impulse control. right? That's probably something that we've all experienced.
I try to do that regularly in my day in, day out life. And so I'm like, oh.
Especially when people bring that snack tray to work.
Yes.
Oh, as a pastor, the holiday seasons, and God bless you people at Grace Fellowship, I love you, but my goodness, the snack trays that come in, that are given to, a lot of impulse control, a lot of willpower being tapped there. And then performance control, this is focusing on your energy on the task at hand, managing time, persevering when you feel the urge to quit. So when you just are like gutting it out, you're tapping into that. So what he says basically is that when you use your willpower, scientists would say that you're depleting your ego, or just kind of this mental state. And what's really crazy is there's a couple studies that he cites of how they in one study they broke a group of candidates into 3 different groups. One group, if they performed a task, they gave them a milkshake before the task, right? They got a milkshake. The other group got just a glop of some little dairy substance, right? Okay. And then the third group got nothing. And what they thought they would see is, the people who got the milkshake would do better. They would do better with their willpower, at the end of the day. And actually what they found out was that the people with the glop of dairy performed just as well. And so the
people that didn't get anything.
Yeah, their willpower definitely tanked. So that's really interesting, right? And so, but it's like, well, wouldn't a milkshake be more motivating? And here's the crazy is there's another study where they were studying the Israeli prison system, specifically with people that were up for parole. And here's what they found. This is crazy. Parole decision judges in the Israeli prison system, they approved parole for about 1 in 3 prisoners, okay? Okay, so 1 in 3 prisoners. But on closer examination, something incredible was happening. Those who appeared early in the morning were granted parole 65% of the time, and those later in the day, less than 10% of the time.
Oh, man. Okay, so sign me up.
Yeah,
if I'm ever in prison.
If you're ever going to be on parole, you want your first thing in the morning. You're more likely to get released, according to this study, right? But this is what's crazy. It says, looking even closer, they found the same pattern right before and after lunch. So in other words,
right before lunch,
10%. Yeah,
only.
The parole board was their presumably their glycogen stores, their sugar stores, and their muscles and all that were like depleted. Okay,
so they were 10% less likely to approve parole.
Yeah, no, they only approved it 10% of the time just before lunch, but then after
it'd go back up to that 65%.
And then here's the thing: they ruled out it was same crimes, same behavior that were being treated differently based on the time of day. And so here's the deal: what they were saying was, it's not an exercise of willpower to say no to somebody because they're going to be up for parole later.
Right.
The real test in willpower was, do I let this person go free? That was the wrestle. That was the determination. And really, they found out they only really had capacity for so many. Again, without either taking a break.
Right.
So what's really interesting is if you combine that with the milkshake study, what you find out is actually little small meals and just getting some sugar back in your system actually maybe helps you out with willpower.
Okay.
So they say there's 2 things. Your willpower is regulated by the amount of glucose in your system. And then the other thing is that rest is key. Rest is very critical for willpower. And so you think about it, even getting up, taking a break, taking a walk can be helpful for that. So he gives some strategies here about how you use or leverage or grow in willpower. And that's where I want to get back to David Blaine. Willpower strategy number 1 is pick your battles. And he says this: David Blaine is famous for his acts of willpower. He has suspended himself in a glass case above London where he ate absolutely nothing for 44 days. He holds the record for holding his breath underwater, a feat that requires an enormous amount of self-control. Okay, he stood on top of a pillar that was less than 22 inches wide without a harness, 85 feet above Bryant Park in New York City for more than 36 hours. Okay, here's the thing. And we talked about how his weight, he'll do these things at about 180 pounds, but then he balloons up to about 230 pounds. Okay, but get this. His apartment is a mess, and he's missed having his name in the Guinness Book of World Records because he was literally too lazy to fill out the paperwork. So what's going on here? And what they were saying was, so here's David Blaine. So when it comes to willpower, David Blaine puts a lot of energy into certain tasks, but guess what? Those tasks use so much of his willpower that it's like the rest of the time
You just can't.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so
This makes me think maybe I can give myself just a little bit of leeway if like I put in like a really good workout one day.
Yeah.
And then I just don't have the energy for it tomorrow.
Well, see, there you go. So it's like, it really does come down to, do I work out today or clean the house, right? So pick your battles. You're using the same willpower. Willpower strategy number 2 is to make a to-do list. And of course, David Allen, he's the author of Getting Things Done. And he talks about this, how if you really are better off, and they've kind of studied this out, that if you're thinking about something, write it down. It's like, I need to do that. That there's something about actually putting it on a to-do list that releases your brain from using, because every time it comes up, you're draining some of your willpower just by thinking about it. And so actually creating a to-do list is good for you. Plus it makes you feel better, a little more motivated when you check things off. Third thing is this, positive procrastination. Usually we think of procrastination in a bad way, but they were saying leveraging it in a healthy way. Say like for, if it is about that piece of chocolate cake, not saying I'm not going to have that, but saying I'll have that later.
Okay.
I'll have that later. And they talked about even like maybe if you're trying to quit smoking, even if you shut yourself down and say, no, I won't have that, it might be a better option to say, well, I'll have that later or whatever. It's something
so like
about
when you have that urge.
When you have that urge, you're not saying no and using that source of willpower. It's kind of a little psychological, I guess, hack or trick, if you will. The fourth thing is keep track of yourself. This was crazy. In another study, it says that people were less likely to steal Halloween candy from an empty room when there was a mirror present.
That's hilarious.
It's because people, whether consciously or subconsciously, did not want to see themselves breaking the rule. And so there's something about the way, and it's a personal point of accountability. So we tend to do better sticking to our goals, things if we have an awareness of ourselves. So there you go. And this was really cool. They concluded kind of with Benjamin Franklin here, who had this list of 13 virtues. Now, the thing with Benjamin Franklin, he had these. So these were, in a way, almost kind of a rule of life for Benjamin Franklin.
Sure.
There's these 13 virtues, things that he said, I want to be good at these things. He knew he couldn't work at all 13 at once. So he would practice one of these virtues every week. And then he would give himself a grade on each of the virtues daily.
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting. If you think about this, journaling is a good way, and it doesn't have to be exhaustive. It doesn't have to be pages of journaling. But if you think about getting to the end of the day, having a journal at your bedside table that you just kind of like, what would it be like to say, hey, I'm going to work on this thing this week or today, give yourself a grade on something, look at your rule of life, things like that. And if you're not familiar with what we're talking about with the rule of life, go check out the episode, The One Rule You Need, and we talk about this a little bit. But, I found that really interesting that for Benjamin Franklin, he was someone who said he admitted his daily reflection on these things brought him much of his success in life. So the key here is that you'll be constantly monitoring yourself to a standard that you choose. And you will automatically find yourself altering your behavior along the way. So that's kind of Mr. Baumeister's take on willpower. Jesse, you're representing kind of a little bit different. Willpower doesn't work is what Benjamin Hardy says.
So where I think these books are similar is they both find that willpower can be depleted.
It's a finite supply.
So there is just a limited supply of it. So that's where they kind of agree. However, Hardy thinks that basically you need to just completely forget willpower.
Take it out.
Just take it out.
Don't rely on it.
Don't rely on it.
Okay.
And just focus on goal setting.
Okay.
And goal setting in regards to your environment, like changing your environment and the things that surround you.
Yeah.
In order to make those goals happen.
Okay.
So, sorry.
Yeah.
Proactively shape your environment to the life you want, so you subsequently shape your thoughts and your behaviors.
Okay.
And so he just said that basically he kind of breaks this down into 3 parts. Your environment shapes you. So a historian, Will Durant, spent decades studying the history of the world, concluding that great leaders do not shape history. Instead, he found that difficult situations created great leaders. And so basically in this, he's saying that if you'll change your environment to expect more of you, that you'll actually step up to the plate.
You'll rise to the challenge.
Yes. Which
is interesting because we talked about in a previous episode on finding your community.
Yeah.
We talked about how your community needs to challenge you, because if we're not adequately challenged, we can really just burn out and just kind of give up. So I could see how shaping your environment could play into that.
Yeah. And then every environment has a set of written and unwritten rules.
Sure.
I laugh because this is kind of a funny thing. So they did this behavioral study with fleas in a jar.
Okay.
And so if you put fleas in a jar, they'll jump out if there's no lid. But they noticed that if you put the lid on top of the fleas and you let it sit there for 3 days, that's it.
3 days. But how long is that in the life of a flea?
I don't know.
Is that like 30 years?
I don't know. I don't know. But they noticed that the fleas would stop jumping as high.
Okay.
Because they'd hit the lid. So they stopped jumping that high. So then after the 3 days, they would remove the lid.
Okay.
And the fleas still would not exit the jar. They just stay because the environment was shifted. They changed with the environment.
Interesting.
So basically, Hardy's saying that we're like fleas.
I was just going to ask, are you calling our listeners and watchers fleas here?
A little bit. So basically on this first part is like, if you remain stuck in the same roles and patterns, it doesn't matter how much willpower you exert, you will always be confined within the limiting context of your environment.
So don't be a flea.
Don't be a flea. Break the lid off.
Which is really interesting because I think we all do find ourselves in environments where maybe there have been limitations put on us, and it's like, if we don't test that ceiling every so often, we might,
or even change it up.
Yeah.
Like
that's really interesting.
Just shift it.
Yeah, that's good.
And the part 2 was how to make willpower irrelevant. So basically,
he really does not want us counting on willpower.
No, peak experiences happen during periods of rest and recovery. So that's another thing that
it's very similar.
Baumeister and Hardy kind of relate on, because although Baumeister's saying rest is important to help build willpower,
right?
Hardy's saying that no, rest is needed so that you can achieve the goals that you've set for yourself. So rest and recovery will actually increase your productivity, and journaling is a key part of resting, because as you journal, you can see kind of how far you've come, how far you need to go, and connect with your reason why.
Yeah.
So kind of like your rule of life, connecting back to your reason for existing.
Yeah.
What legacy do you want to leave? All that stuff.
Yeah. Now here's the thing. So if you're finding your why, though, I think that Baumeister might push back on that and say, well, yeah, by doing those things, maybe you're replenishing those sources of willpower. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I don't know, because he's basically saying don't count on willpower because you need to focus more on your environment and goals.
All right, go ahead and finish it out, and we'll
then
I got some
part
thoughts
3,
here.
Outsource high performance and success to your environment. So if you want to achieve your goals, you must determine which environment produces the best outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So structuring your life, even structuring the people in your life to help you get out what you want to get out of life. So you can set up external defense systems around your goals too. For example, if you leave your laptop charger at home, you'll be more motivated to work hard during the few hours you have until the battery runs out. Another thing that he mentioned was keeping your telephone at home.
Yeah.
If you wanted to connect with your family. So if you go out with your family, have a family outing, keep implementing what you learn until it becomes unconscious. So kind of that, I can't remember what episode that was, where we just talked about how if you learn how to play a guitar, it's like the first few times, it's like you're like, okay, I have to really think of what a G, a C, D.
It goes from like a left brain activity to a right brain, or I can't remember which one,
so
but
basically Hardy's saying, make this become something that's unconscious, that it's just part of your everyday behavior.
Yeah.
So that you'll be successful. So you won't have to depend on your willpower.
Interesting. So obviously Hardy is talking a lot about environment, and I guess what I could glean from Hardy's process here is where I agree. I think is the idea that we have to be really careful. Willpower, I think we would all agree, ebbs and flows.
Right.
Right. There's times that you feel real motivated to do stuff, and then there's times you're like, no way, not going to happen. And so what I kind of appreciate is he really pays a lot of attention to your environment stuff. And I was even thinking about even on the last one, talking about like, okay, if Krispy Kreme is a big deal for you, and like it's so tempting, and that's always on the way home.
Yeah, you just have to
reroute.
You might have to go the long way.
Find a different way home, like change your environment or change something so that it kind of like takes that off the table. And so I like the idea about thinking through your environment. Even things like, hey, if waking up in the morning and going to the gym, if you have to wake up early, maybe having your gym clothes already packed, ready in a bag, sitting by the door. So when you wake up, like, okay, that's there. I just have to grab and go.
Well, what's interesting is where I kind of disagree with Hardy in the sense, so I've done the whole no health food in my house, and all that stuff. And it's like, here's the thing. If I really want something, it does not matter. Yeah. It does not matter if I have it in my house. It does not matter if I have to drive to go get it. It doesn't matter how inconvenient. If I really want to have something that's Snickers. Not healthy for me, I will just do it. So I'm just rebellious enough. So then there's other people that I've heard and talked to that basically say if you allow yourself something that you kind of crave in little doses every day or even once a week, that it actually oh, well, I can have that. I just don't need it right now. Yeah. And so that I can have it later, that Baumeister says, it's that kind of is kind of similar to that thought process, I guess. And so I don't know, these two books are kind of interesting because I think there's some very good similarities, but then there's also some things that it's okay. Yeah. They definitely disagree in the sense that he's basically saying just don't count on your willpower because it can fail you. Yeah. Because it is limited and because you're Baumeister says the ego kind of depletes. Yeah. And then you have no willpower at all, which makes me think of our kids. Because when they come home from school, sometimes I'll get the worst attitudes out of them, especially recently. So Mick is in 5th grade and he's doing tackle football, but because it's this out of school activity, he goes to practice at 5:30 instead of just doing it on the heels of school. Right. And it goes until 7:30. Yeah. So this poor little guy has worked for 6 to 8 hours at school.
Yeah, at school. He's been in school all day.
And he's had to really behave well for his teachers, which takes a lot of willpower. And then he has to come home and he has to use willpower to do the chores that he knows he has to get done. Yep. And then he might get an hour rest. Okay. Right. And then he has to go exert himself physically for 2.5 hours. And then by the time he gets home, you just cannot have a serious, deep conversation with him because he just gets angry.
Just go to bed.
He just gets angry. Even telling him to shower is hilarious. He's like, why? Why do I have to shower right now? And I'm just you stink so bad. Yeah. And then Lizzie, she'll just get snippy. Yeah. Because she's a teenager. So
13, she's kind of got a little bit of sass going on. All that. No, it's really interesting. When you brought that up then, because we were talking about this episode, and I thought that was so insightful that, especially again, where these two agree is that I think it is beneficial for us to think about willpower as being finite. It is being a limited supply. I like that Baumeister talks about it more as a muscle though that can grow. where I think that these two books can complement each other, though, is I think Hardy is right in saying, hey, we can structure some things that work with our willpower so that we're not depleting it, right? Yes. So look at your environment, look at some of these things, focus on goals and what actions, and even maybe even reward systems, because, again, I think reward systems would kick back into again, creating the to-do list. When you check something off, there's something subconsciously that says, oh, I did that. Yeah. I feel better about that. I checked that off my list. And so again, I think that's a way that willpower gets replenished, I've given up on that, maybe my willpower is depleted.
But you haven't rested.
I guess not. Something.
I don't know. I ate before I came, so I'm good.
So yeah, I need even just a glop of some dairy substance would help me out. But I thought that was really insightful for you, because I thought, man, what a practical takeaway, especially for families and even just coworkers and stuff. Like sometimes to just step back. It's not, we shouldn't just give license for people to mistreat us or speak bad to us, or, whatever. But sometimes it's just the human factor, especially with our kids. Like, okay, you've had a full day at school. And if they get a little snippy, if they get a little, again, I think you can say, hey, I don't need to be talked to that way. Right. But also recognizing, man, their willpower is probably in the tank.
Yeah, maybe even saying, hey, I know you've had a long day at school, and that can be really difficult to get through. However, I need you to try to do better with your tone when you speak with me. Yeah. So it's basically, one, keeping yourself calm. Yeah. In that situation, like especially if you have a tendency to blow up if you are disrespected, to just take a moment to take a deep breath and realize
don't take it personal.
Yeah, that they're not doing it to get at you. It's their willpower is completely depleted. They don't know how to behave necessarily in that situation, or maybe they know how, but it's like, I don't have the energy for it. Yeah. And I think if we're being honest, though, each of us have those moments. Yeah. And if we can be gracious towards one another, just whether that's that coworker, whether it's even the stranger at Walmart that just is having a bad attitude, right? And you're like, oh my goodness.
Maybe they just need some carbs.
So it's like, yeah, exactly. I'm just like, it's amazing to me though, also, like when we talked about like Sabbath and taking a day to rest and recover and connect with family, connect with fun, delighting in life. Yeah. Taking that moment to just delight in something. I feel like, man, both of these books really tend to like cheer that on. Yeah. It's like rest is very important for life and for willpower and for, I don't know, just showing up.
So final takeaway here, you think about yours here a second. I would say that both acknowledge willpower is a thing, right? But it is a finite supply, right? Yep. And so we need to be strategic in how we use it. What I like about Baumeister is that he talks about how we can grow it. I think maybe what might not be considered from Baumeister's perspective, though, is the fact that this takes time to grow in your willpower. It's not like I can just go. I mean, it really is like a muscle. And if you've trained in the gym, you know that gains don't come super easy. And so as you live life, I think one thing about Baumeister is you might think, oh yeah, 2 weeks and I'll be really good at this, or 21 days to a new habit and stuff. I honestly don't think that stuff really works. I think you do have to exercise these things. And where I agree with Hardy is I think that you do have to sometimes look at things like environment. But also in previous episodes, we talked about just identity. Things flow from identity as well. Right. And so I think identity can play into willpower as well. So, I like what they both bring to the table. Yeah. I probably am a little more drawn to Baumeister's book, Willpower. Yep. I kind of like that. So
I agree, actually.
Yeah. Do you have any other thoughts or comments on that?
No.
All right.
Yeah.
So, well, hey, that's been our first official Battle of the Books episode. I don't know. We just kind of like thought of that as we've had these 2 books on willpower. And so we thought, let's talk about them. Let's interact with them. Hopefully you got something out of this discussion, and we had a good time with this. But hey, just know willpower, it's finite. It's limited. All right. So be choosy about those goals and things that you're doing, and be aware. I think at the end of the day, just be aware.
And grace for your kids.
And grace for your kids, grace for your coworkers, especially if it's 5:00. Don't go ask your boss if you can take those days off of vacation. Do it first thing in the morning,
yes.
right?
65% higher
right?
probability, probably.
If the Israeli parole system says anything about that. Well, thanks for joining us. Again, as always, like, subscribe, share, and you can go to legacylifestyle.life and check out our website there and sign up for our mailing list. We're going to be communicating just some different things and unpacking some things and just talking about where we're going at Legacy Lifestyle. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.